Welcome to another episode of the Green Gold series. In the last episode, we talked about a plant from the time you transplant it to the 6 months, where your goal is to break the dormancy and start getting vegetation. Now in this episode, we're going to look at the nutritional needs 6 months after to the time the plant then starts to flower. But before we go there, remember to subscribe. So this is how your 3-year tree should look like. Now you have a strong stem, very good foliage, and a very healthy color, dark green. A tree like this one then is able to hold many fruits. You can see that at this age, already you've started to have the first stage of production, which is called the cauliflower stage. This is the part that opens and gives you the flower. And after the flowers, then you have the babies. So a lot of activities are needed here because this tree is a very heavy feeder. Just like when your child is growing, they are very heavy feeders. So your root system continues taking care of the root system because this is where the feeding happens. And the root system must be fed with the phosphorus fertilizers. Optional is to use fertilizer, organic fertilizer, that is manure, but the manure that you have composed well. In another episode, we'll be talking to you about how to compost manure so that then you've broken down the nutritional value of that manure and it's available to the root systems. Now remember, there are two things, phosphorus and manure, but the soil itself, which is hosting these minerals, has to be in the right form. That is what you call the soil structure. In this case, we also use organic matter, a fertilizer that then improves the organic structure of your soil so that then the soil encourages the uptake and the exchange of the minerals and the water. The feeding system of the roots must be at the canopy area. This is where your root hairs are, and the root hairs are the ones that actually support the feeding. That's where the food is taken in. You avoid feeding at the stem because if you put fertilizer there, you're wasting it. The taproot does not feed. The rooting system is within the canopy area. As you can see, we've poured manure, in this case 3 debes to 4 debes. In some places they'll put even 5, and you spread it well across, and then after that you apply your mulching so that then you're conserving the moisture level of your soil. So you mulch around, you conserve your water and the moisture level of your soil by mulching round the tree. So that's it about the roots. So the next stage is to look at the other feeding system, which is the leaves. So in this case, this plant needs a lot of micronutrients, and again energy is required because it's trying to grow and trying to get the energy to support the process that it is going through of flowering and bearing babies. The micronutrients are needed, but at higher levels as opposed to the plant when it was a smaller stage, the 0 to 2 years. So in this case, you need boron, and we apply boron as a straight micronutrient without having it mixed. And the reason we do that is because this plant is producing pollen, and this plant is going to produce flowers. Boron will help you hold that flower and make it strong so that when the fertilization takes place, then the flowers don't abort. So boron is very important, and it is recommended that you use a boron that is more than 15%. The next thing that you ask yourself is what else is needed? Now calcium becomes very important because calcium, just like in the human being, your bone structure is enhanced by the calcium. So in this case, if this plant does not have enough calcium, it will not have cell multiplication done very well. So your fruits will be smaller and they will not have the texture that you require. So cell multiplication means you'll have more fruits. Once they're fertilized, you have more fruits and healthier fruits. The next big thing here is also a foliar that is high in K, which is potassium. Potassium is the one that is responsible for also the texture of the fruits, the size of the fruits also will be supported by the potassium that you put in that plant. The micro elements then becomes the next thing. Why the micro elements? In this case, you're talking about the vigor. At all those stages, they'll just keep what you call aborting. Any fruit, any plant, when they don't have the minerals and the micronutrients, they abort. So that is the process you need to understand for you to have the right fruits. So from here, let's look at the flowers and how they should look like. And from there, we'll look at the fruits and how they should look like. You have the different stages of flowering, which is the cauliflower stage. Then you have actual flowering, and then from here, pollination and fertilization happens, and then you get the babies. The nutritional elements that are needed here at the cauliflower stage, because this is where you're having the pollens being produced, you need a lot of boron. And this boron is also needed at the stage of flowering. So in these 2 months, you'll need to apply boron every month. The reason why we use boron is that boron is the one that strengthens the pollen and the flowers. So when the fertilization happens, then you don't have the flowers aborting, and when the fruits are formed, the flower is strong enough, or the pollen is strong enough to hold the flowers. So we use boron at this stage, which has got a higher concentrate than when the plant was younger. And in our case, we use nectar boron, which has got 13% boron, soluble boron. In this case also, the calcium and the boron are important, as mentioned. Calcium is very important in the cell multiplication. So the size and the texture of the fruit is also important, based on the amount of calcium you'll use. Here again, you use higher calcium as opposed to the lower calciums that you use when the plant is younger, because it needs to develop the fruit and the texture, and it requires a lot of calcium. In our case here, we use calciboron. This again has got calcium in high contents, 13%, and a smaller percentage of boron. You can use both of them every month concurrently. And remember, this plant is also going through a lot of activities. There's a lot of activities that are happening for it to be able to sustain and develop these fruits. So there's a lot of metabolism happening, and therefore it needs all the micronutrients that the other plants needed. In our case, we also continue to give the Agramix. Agramix is a foliar that has got what we call the vitamins, or otherwise the micro essential nutrients, the zinc, the iron, and the manganese. That helps the vigor, the energy, and the metabolism that this plant requires to continue the process of moving from cauliflower to flower to baby stage. And so you have your babies here. In this case, your focus then changes, because your interest here is the quality and the texture of these fruits. And there are two things that will take care of that. That is your potassium and your calcium. The calcium will help in developing the texture of the fruit, and the potassium will help in developing the size of that fruit. So in this case, you'll give calcium that is high concentration, like we talked about, 15 and above, and you'll also use the potassium that is high, either as top dressing, 45 plus in terms of percentage, or 15 upwards in terms of foliar application of the potassium. And that is all on how you nurture your tree from the time it is 6 months to the time you're actually having your first fruit. Remember to subscribe for the next episode.